Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Vegans Across the World. Today, I'm very excited. We have a guest from Seychelles, Africa. Well, Seychelles is a country of its own. It's part of the continent of Africa. Her name is Karin. Hello, Karin, and welcome.
Hi. Hi. Thank you. Nice to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. Just a little information, a little trivia for everybody watching this. They are pre-recorded, and it just so happens that it's almost 1 o'clock in the morning for me, and it's almost 9 a.m. for Karin. So we had to do a little coordinating for this. With the time differences, it makes it a little crazy sometimes, but nevertheless, we are here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all start out with sharing my screen, and I'm going to show everyone where you're at and give a little information about the area. Let me know if you see my screen when I share that. Do you
Yeah.
see that? You see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So there you are. That red dot right there. That's Seychelles. Looks like it's in the middle of the world here, in the
If
middle
I'm
of
not
the ocean.
mistaken, 1,000 miles away from anywhere or something along those lines.
Oh, wow. Right in the middle of the ocean, its own little world. I'm going to center that. And I'm not exactly sure what part of Seychelles you're in because there are many islands.
So I'm on this main island, Mahe, which is the biggest island out of all of them, which is
Okay.
where the capital is. So I'm on the southeast coast in a place that is beautifully called Fairyland, close to what you see Anse
Nice.
Royale down on the southeast coast. So I'm just up from that.
Right here?
Yeah,
Anse
between
Real.
Pointe-Noncelle and Anse Royale, you'll find me up a mountain.
Nice. Very nice. So I'm going to
Yeah.
give some information about Seychelles. It's an archipelago of 115 islands in the Indian Ocean off of East Africa. It is part of Africa, as I said before. It has numerous beaches, coral reefs, nature preserves, mountain rainforests, as well as rare animals. Victoria is the capital of Seychelles, which is up here, and it's the smallest in the world. The capital of Seychelles is the smallest in the world. It can easily be explored on foot in less than a day, which I thought was very interesting because I've seen actually, I think, smaller islands, and I thought that was very, but I guess they're talking about the capital. So it
Yeah.
has, yeah, it has some of the rarest endemic birds, including the bare-legged scops owl. I hope I'm saying that right, which was thought to become extinct before being rediscovered in 1959. Um, let's see. Also, Bird Island is home to the heaviest land tortoise living in the world. Her name is Esmeralda, and she weighs 670 pounds. Have you ever seen her?
I haven't. I've not been to Bird Island. And I'm not sure if I'm mistaken here, but interesting enough, I think Esmeralda is a he or something like that. Or it's one of the biggest
Okay.
or oldest tortoises here that has a unisex name. So yeah, it's a
Okay.
giant Aldabra tortoise.
Okay. That's awesome to
Yeah.
know. That's good trivia. So, the coco de mer is native to the islands, and it produces the largest seed in the world, weighing up to 33 pounds. So that's some world records they've got there. Um, let's see, where was I at? Ian Fleming. I love this. Ian Fleming, the author of the James Bond movies and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, by the way, which is one of my favorite films, visited Seychelles. Visited Seychelles in 1958 looking for inspiration for his latest story, For Your Eyes Only. Breadfruit is very popular. Legend says that anyone who eats it while on the island will return someday. Seychelles was once a pirate hangout, and then the population is less than 100,000 as of 2019. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And then I will get back to us. And I want to get to know you a little bit. Why don't you just please tell us about yourself? For example, what do you do and what kind of activism might you be involved in?
Yeah. So first of all, I obviously I live here in Seychelles, but I'm actually a serial expat. Originally, I'm from Sweden. Yeah, but I've lived sort of across Europe, uh, Belgium, UK, Spain, UAE, and now I live here in Seychelles. So I, interestingly enough, although I'm vegan, I work for an omnivore celebrity chef. So heading up
Do
branding
we
and
know who that is,
marketing.
or should
He's
are you
American, actually, Chef David Myers, also known as Gypsy Chef, so a traveling chef.
okay?
Um, and so I work for him. I do branding, marketing, etc. But I also retrained last year as a yoga instructor. I was very lucky that a fellow islander here, he launched his yoga school, so I was able to train to become a yoga teacher. And I also retrained last year to become a vegan nutrition coach as well. So I made some good use of the pandemic to further some of my knowledge and develop myself a little bit. In terms of activism, so one of the things when I lived in Dubai previously that was very near and dear to my heart was the hashtag Adopt Don't Shop movement. So I am the mum of two rescue dogs now. One has decided he's staying in Seychelles when we move away, so we only have two left.
Well,
And yeah, so we rescued those in Dubai, and it's a huge issue in Dubai with people abandoning dogs, people purchasing dogs as gifts, not really thinking through the whole life of a dog. So that's something that's always been very near and dear to me. So besides adopting my own dogs, we also did some fostering as well to help out and just spread the word as much as we could. And then also something that I suppose in a way since moving to Seychelles 2 years ago became so much more evident to me because I had the time to stop a little bit more and kind of think about how I do things in my everyday life when it comes to what sort of packaging are things in that I buy in the supermarket. Am I reusing things? Is there an alternative for something that's disposable and so on? So I've become a lot more engaged in adopting an eco-friendly mindset just in my everyday life. And I do think that one thing that a lot of people are very worried when it comes to activism and things like eco-consciousness. They worry that, okay, I'm not doing all the things I should be doing. But that's not what it's about. It's about having a mindset of always thinking about these things, looking at, okay, I'm at the supermarket, I need to buy nuts. Do I buy this tiny little bag of nuts or do I bulk buy instead? You know, I'm going to buy fruit and vegetables. Do I use the plastic bags in the supermarket or do I bring my own bags? There's so many little things we can do just by having the right mindset at all times. So that I would say is a type of activism that is important to me, is anything that's related to eco-consciousness and animal rights, really. And what
yeah,
else I can say? Yeah, sorry, go on.
I was just gonna say I've seen a few pictures over there of some of the and of other places as well of some of the stuff that washes up on the beaches. It's just abhorrent, and
Yeah,
people don't see that when they're visiting nice little tourist areas. But when you live, and obviously I don't live there, but I've seen the pictures. When you live on places with shorelines where um, all this trash washes up, and,
yeah.
that is killing sea life. It's horrible, and I mean it's ugly to look at. But imagine when it's doing what you're not seeing, what hasn't washed up yet. You
Yeah,
know.
and I think that's something that it's a big issue here. It's you do see a lot of people who perhaps don't um, care a lot about why littering is bad and what the consequences are. And yes, there is of course the things that wash up that perhaps comes from whether it's the fishing industry or whatever it may be. But what's beautiful here is that there are also a lot of people who have a mindset of, okay, maybe I can't change that person's mind or all these people's mind overnight, but what I can do is I can clean up. So if people go for a hike, for example, they tend to bring a rubbish bag with them, and on their way down the mountain, they'll pick up rubbish. There's also some incredible organizations here. There's an NGO called the Ocean Project. They do, during the pandemic, obviously they haven't been able to, but usually they do a lot of beach cleanups. They engage a lot of the local community and small businesses to be part of it. And they do a lot of research around it and analysis of what it is that they've actually found during the cleanup. So there is sort of two sides of the coin here. There's people who do not understand at all this environmental impact of littering or the choice of packaging, etc. And then there's so many people here in Seychelles who do care a lot about their environment and their island and the future of their island as well. So yeah, and also there's that selflessness of just going around and picking up rubbish if you see it. And what's great is seeing also the schools actually instilling that mentality in children as well.
That's great. That's great. So where are you? You said you're originally from Sweden?
Yeah, so I was born in Sweden. I always say that I'm the least Swedish person you'll come across. I grew up partly in Sweden, partly in Belgium. So I was an expat kid. And then as soon as I finished school, I just hurried up and left the country and moved on to Spain. Spent a few years in Barcelona, which was magical. And then I lived in London for a bit. I lived in the northern part of England as well. I then ended up living in Dubai for 8 years or so before moving here. So, and along the way on my expat journey, I've accumulated a husband, 2 little boys, and my dogs.
So wow, you've been everywhere. I'm a little bit jealous of that. Well, okay, I'm a lot jealous of that. But my usual question would be, what the difference is in cultures. But since you've been around so many places, why don't I just ask you, what's unique about Seychelles in their
Oh
culture?
gosh. I mean, so much. One thing that stood out to me a lot when I first arrived here, especially after having lived in Dubai, where there is, I suppose, there is a certain separation of nationalities that I didn't really see in Spain, for example. I didn't really see in Sweden, but in Dubai, it's very much sort of people are socializing within their nationality and so on. And I came to Seychelles, and there was like this explosion of of color, explosion of nationalities. There was no, oh, I'm Filipino, so I'm only spending time with Filipinos, or I'm Indian, so I spend time with Indians. Everyone is socializing, and everyone is so much more kind of intertwined. It's a very colorful society in that sense, that there aren't any borders in the same way that you see in some other countries. So that's a beautiful thing about Seychelles. And then obviously, you touched on some of the endemic species and so on here. When you arrive here, it is a little bit like that moment in Jurassic Park when you first see the tropical island. It is an incredible sight. And I mean, I've never before lived anywhere where there is this pace of life that is, there are a lot of struggles here for me personally. I think there's a lot of things that, you lack certain conveniences and just being able to book in a handyman when you need them and so on. But what is so beautiful here is this pace of life. So the roads generally are only 40 to 60 kilometers an hour. There's sort of one main road between here and the north. You drive slowly, take your time. People finish work at 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon. People spend a lot of time on the beach because there isn't anything to do, in the sense that there's no shopping malls, there's no amusement parks, there's nothing like that. There is the beach, or there is the mountains to go hiking. So when the weather's bad, there isn't much to do except for swimming in the rain, really. And and there's this whole culture around just being on the beach. So you'll see people there throughout the weekend, any public holiday, most Thursday, Friday afternoons. People gather on the beaches, they have barbecues, they swim, they socialize, and it's just such a beautiful thing. I can compare it in one way to, in Barcelona, there's this chiringuito culture. So people hang out in the evenings or in the weekends on the beaches by the beach bars. But the difference is here, generally, there aren't any beach bars. There's only sort of a couple around the island. So you just are on the beach with your friends, with your family. And it's just such a beautiful culture.
So when you said there's no shopping malls, that made me think of, is there fast food restaurants there?
No, there isn't. No, there's no. There is one Burger King inside the airport, which I think has been closed now since the pandemic anyway. But that's the only international fast food chain that exists here. Besides that, the
That's
fast
amazing
food,
because I
yeah,
I have been to places and even heard about places where it just seems like they will just integrate everywhere around the world. They just
yeah.
find the smallest places to be.
Yeah. No, here
Yes.
it's the local version of fast food is these takeaways. So either they're little trucks or they're tiny little restaurants, and they do takeaway. And this is what people do for lunch. They go and get their takeaway. It's in a sort of paper box with a biodegradable fork, because you're not allowed to have uh, regular plastic in the whole of Seychelles. So that's a culture, and it's all homemade food made that day. It's like rice and curry, for example, or it's that's what fast food is here. Of
Yeah,
course, there's
so
fried food as well, but it's homemade. So
yeah, so that's kind of part of my usual question. It is, what is the culture and food like there? It sounds like you're such a meld of all cultures. But what are they heavily influenced by? Like, example, with their foods, is it Indian foods? Is it? I mean, they have French names. What kind of
yeah.
cultures, like, really, or is it just a melding of all of them?
So Seychelles is Creole.
Okay.
So both language and culture wise. So the food is very much Creole food. So think sort of Creole curries. It's curries with a lot of so first of all they tend to cook everything with coconut oil, because they didn't really have access to dairy in the beginning of when the country first started establishing itself. So you cook with coconut oil. So that's the standard. And then you use spices like cinnamon, for example, in your curries. Obviously chili as well, and so on. But it's that very sort of warm spices that they use for flavoring. So
Warm and
and
sweet and all that mixed
yeah,
together.
exactly. And coconut milk as well in the curries. There's a lot of use of, there's some local vegetables like cassava and pumpkin, for example, local aubergine as well. Breadfruit you mentioned, which is also very popular for curries. And yes, there is a big Indian community as well. So there's also Indian influences on the food. There's things like so satini is a very popular thing. Like when you're having a curry, it's a side dish. It's this green papaya chutney, they call it, but it's more like a sort of cooked green papaya. Absolutely delicious. And there is also the element of people liking fried food. Like in town, there's a couple of fried food shops. But interestingly enough, someone told me that they'd gone to somewhere in, I think, like Louisiana or wherever, where there's also still Creole culture,
Yeah.
and they had tried to speak to this person in English, didn't work, French didn't work, and then they realized that they both spoke Creole, even though it was different. It was actually the same. So it's just so beautiful how so far, literally almost other end of the world, you're actually speaking the same language because of this Creole culture, which is
Yeah.
fantastic.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's a great story. That's
yeah,
that's really interesting. That's funny.
yeah.
I
But
like
then
that.
also, I should add, so aside from, of course, there's this healthy element of all this home cooked food, and sort of fresh barbecues on the beach and so on. But you do also see that there are people who perhaps have quite unhealthy diets here. You see people walking in the morning at 7 a.m. with a soda in one hand and a chocolate bar in the other hand. So there is still, I think, a way to go for some people here to understand nutrition a little bit better, because there
Yeah.
is so much good stuff that you can eat here that's local. There's just such an imbalance between those two worlds. So the fresh food and then the sort of chocolate bars and crisps and so on. So yeah.
Yeah. So how long have you been vegan?
So I'm one of the COVID vegans. I became vegan in beginning of last year. I'm a COVID vegan. Yeah, I had wanted to become plant-based for some time, but I was I've always worked with food, and I grew up in a foodie house. I've always been eating all types of food, and I always said to my friends, like, I'm never going to be able to become vegan because I love all this stuff so much. So I think in a way I was scared of, for example, watching all these documentaries that reveal the truth about the animal industry and so on. So I was scared to face the truth, I think. And then finally I was like, okay, well, I've already started thinking so much more about my health and like supercharging myself and looking to the future of myself personally and the rest of the world. And I love animals. I absolutely love animals. I've always been around animals. So I think I was definitely putting on the blinds. And then finally, I went ahead. I'd actually watched The Game Changers, which has nothing to do with the animal industry, but rather about health.
Yeah.
And it was almost instant. It was within a week, I'd cut out all of the animal products from my diet. And yeah, I'm so happy I finally became vegan. So it's over a year now that it's, yeah, almost a year and a half that I've been vegan now.
That's wonderful. I mean, but it's funny that you mentioned the game changers and you talked about the fact that you just became a yoga teacher. I am actually taking classes now to become a yoga teacher during the pandemic.
Yay!
And
Amazing.
I am going to a school that's called World Peace Yoga, which is basically intertwined with the World Peace Diet. Have you heard of that?
I
By
haven't. No, no. I mean, I know obviously in yoga, if you really follow the principles of
yeah.
yoga, you have a vegan diet.
Yeah. You should check out the book World Peace Diet by
Yeah.
Will Tuttle. Um, and they very much, their foundation is on the principles of that book. As a matter of fact, I want to show you the book. Yeah. So here is the book that's by my yoga teacher.
Yeah.
Can you hear me when I'm like covering my
Yeah.
face with the. So World Peace
Excellent.
Yoga. This is
Yeah.
the class I'm taking from the author of this. And
Yeah.
they base this is one of our curriculum, World Peace Diet by Will Tuttle. So if
Yeah.
you get a chance, you should check that out. It's
Yeah.
really great because what I really love is the fact that while I'm taking these classes, I had no idea how much they were actually doing animal rights activism with their
Yeah.
yoga classes because all the people that I'm taking these classes, see, I've been vegan for about 15 years. So this is natural for me, but these people who are taking these yoga classes with me, none of them are vegan. And
Yeah.
now I'm seeing them like realize, oh, wow, in order to be a yoga teacher, I'm supposed to learn ahimsa. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
to see the education that they're getting about veganism through being a yoga teacher or through learning to be a yoga teacher is really incredible. I had no
Yeah.
idea that kind of activism was going on by that by taking that class because well I'm already vegan so but it's really inspirational to see these people like because it's part of our curriculum to see them read that book. So
Yeah.
what made you want to become vegan? You kind of told us you said it was you said because you realized the connection and that's why I went and got that book. um
Yes, yeah. So, yeah. So initially, I think obviously after watching Game Changers, it was very much. I think I was going through a lot about thinking more about my body and how can I make myself more supercharged to still be able to play with grandchildren when I'm 85 or 90 kind of thing. So I think I've been following a lot of people over the past couple of years, their podcasts and Instagram and so on, who have very specific sort of mindsets through about health. And so I was very inspired by that, and that's why I watched Game Changers, and that was initially was that whole sort of health kick of thinking about how can I remove all of this from my body and just put all this amazing superfood in my body, all the vegetables and nuts and seeds and everything. And I've always eaten a lot of vegetables anyway. We already used to have a lot of vegetarian and sometimes vegan meals at home. But now I was feeling like I was really infusing myself with all of this amazing plant power, which felt so good. But as I mentioned, it was also, although it was the health bit that I suppose ignited me to become a vegan, it was suddenly I was facing then a lot of the truths about the animal farming realities. And I think I suppose sometimes I would have in the past always been like, oh, well, growing up, my parents would, they would buy their beef from the local farmer. They would get their fish from the local fisherman and so on. I would always tell myself that. But the reality is you're still contributing to something much bigger than that.
Yeah.
And also, simple things like, since becoming a mom and breastfeeding myself, it just puts you in a completely different perspective when you look
Yeah,
at
you start to make
cows.
the connection, like, how would I feel if somebody
Yeah,
took my baby away to take my breast milk for them?
yeah, yeah. So it's all of those connections suddenly coming into place. I sort of I suppose you can almost liken it to, if someone is, let's say someone is an alcoholic, and no one's going to make them stop. They're going to get to a point where they stop themselves, and that's whether that's rock bottom or whatever it is that ignites that. It's only them who are going to do that. And it was like the same thing, that suddenly was all of those little bits just fell into place. And I regret that I've not become a vegan sooner, but I'm
That
so
is the only
grateful that I
regret
am
vegans
now.
have,
Yeah,
is that we didn't do it
absolutely.
sooner.
Yeah, yeah. But here I am now. So yeah. And
And
it's
we're
funny. I was
happy for
talking to
that.
my sister the other day about, and we were like, so we don't personally follow the Kardashians or any of these people, but I'm so grateful Kim Kardashian is now talking about vegan food and promoting plant-based lifestyles. I don't care that I disagree with some parts of what she does. I love that she's spreading the word to however many million people are listening to her. So anyone who
Yeah,
can get
we
the
have
word
to be
out is
careful
good.
of the celebrities, though. They tend to fall off. They fall in and fall off, and I'm wary of that. But I think she's talked about it before. Even I think she's talked about veganism before. But like, Jay Z and Beyonce,
Yeah, they did
being
21 days or something, and then yeah.
yeah, and even Miley Cyrus, who everybody thought was actually vegan, like coming out on Joe Rogan's podcast that she got brain fog, so she's eating fish again. It's very disappointing. The only
Yeah.
person I have any kind of confidence in is Joaquin. I'm sorry, but that's the only
Oh
Joaquin Phoenix
yes.
is the only person
Yes.
I have any confidence in at this point.
Yeah. And Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton is doing a lot of
Yeah,
good stuff.
you know what? Actually, yeah, I do like him a lot too, even though I'm not a
Yeah.
fan of car racing. But I
Yeah.
I love how he's promoting it. But yeah,
Yeah.
there's a few others. I mean,
Yeah.
Russell Simmons and people like that. But let me ask you: Are any of your family and friends vegan? You just mentioned your sister. Is she
Yeah. So
vegan?
she is. She's been vegan. So she started becoming a vegetarian about 20 years, or perhaps more than 20 years ago now. Yeah, more than 20 years ago. And she was sort of on and off vegan vegetarian for a little while. But yeah, so she's ultimately been um, working more with plant-based diets for over 2 decades now. And she's such a great ally, because I remember when she became vegan at first, And my mum is a great cook. My dad is a great cook, but they were sort of, my mum was trying to accommodate my sister, but my sister also took it upon herself to start cooking. So I've always seen vegan cooking around me, vegan baking. Like, she would always make amazing things. So I've always been around vegan food, and also she was, from the very beginning, she's always been very much about the animal rights, and she was very engaged in some organizations. So she would always talk a lot about the ethical side of veganism. So I've always been around it. I also have my brother and his family. For years, they've been eating quite a lot of plant-based foods. They are in the UK. There's a big thing about flexitarian, is a term now, which is all these people
Yeah.
who are at least trying to reduce their animal product intake, which I suppose is a step in the right direction, although I want them to go further. But yeah, so my brother and his family, they eat quite a lot of plant-based. My husband has been great about this. So he's a British man who's very much into his McDonald's, unfortunately, which obviously he can't get here. But since I became vegan, he's been super supportive. He eats the food that I cook. He gives me feedback on the new things I try, and so he's been great. And then I suppose, yeah, I have some friends around me as well who are vegan, but also because I come from having worked in the F&B industry, I'm also surrounded by a lot of people who obviously they're omnivores and work directly with seafood and meat, and some of them, they'll crack the jokes about it, but yeah, I feel I have the support system I need.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I work with dogs. So obviously most of my clientele, I don't know anybody that's feeding their dogs vegan like I do, but so I have to handle that kind of stuff. People who work in the restaurant industries, there's few vegan restaurants if you're lucky enough to get in, and so we're all surrounded by that. We live in
Yeah.
a non-vegan world, um, but yeah, hopefully we can influence those people and talk to them
Yeah.
and influence them somehow. So you said your sister's now going vegan. You've been vegan for a while. My usual question is, what do your friends and family think about your veganism? What about well, you told us a little bit about your husband. What about um, your non-vegan friends and family? Are they supportive of you being vegan?
Yeah, so I would say overall yes. So the one thing I struggle a little bit with is my children, because it's a bit tricky to get a hold of all the right food for two little picky eaters here. I suppose where it's been tricky is more when people maybe don't understand vegan nutrition fully. That's what it's one thing having people making a joke about you being vegan. That's kind of like, okay, that's fine. But I think the trickier thing is if people don't really know about ingredients at all, then they might serve you something that they believe is vegan. They might serve you something that contains a sauce that you know, because you know that it's a sauce that contains anchovies, for example, but they just assume that, oh, but this is just a marination sauce. It doesn't say beef on it, doesn't say fish on it. They assume that it's plant-based. So there's of course been like a few incidents where, and even at restaurants here as well, but also at people's houses, where I've been served things and I realized that this is not vegan. This has got something in it, and that can be a little bit awkward, because I think if it wasn't for the ethical fact, then I might not be as offended about it. But because I disagree with eating animal products, so therefore it feels really awful when you realize you've ingested something that you really shouldn't have, and that can be a
Yeah.
little bit tricky, I suppose. But I also, at the same time, I know that people have the good intent, and people really try to be accommodating as best as they can, and of course it's not their intention to serve you something that you were not meant to eat. And I suddenly understand a lot more of people who are actually severely lactose intolerant or gluten intolerant or any kind of allergy that have probably already lived with this since they were born. So yeah, it's quite humbling.
Yeah, I just think of myself, I'm allergic to milk and stuff like that. So I had quit drinking whole milk way before I ever became vegan, before I learned about what happens in the dairy industry. So that wasn't so hard for me to quit. The rest of the dairy I could get away with. But now I just say I'm allergic to animal abuse, you know?
Yes,
You know?
that's so good. Yes, I'm going to steal
Yeah.
that one. Yeah.
So so would you say it's easy or hard to be vegan in Seychelles?
Um, it's it's changed a lot in the last 2 years here in terms of what you can get a hold of. But I I always say that it's for me anyway. It's been a blessing in disguise that I became vegan here because I've not been able to rely on ready products. In the very beginning, when I became vegan here, there was no access to tofu, for example. There
Mhm.
was sometimes you could get a hold of soy milk, but no other nut milks or anything. There's no ready like proteins such as sort of ready burgers or even ready-made seitan or anything. There wasn't anything like that here, so I ended up making literally everything from scratch. I remember even trying to make I was trying to make tofu. It was an absolute disaster, but I've been making like my own washed flour
I've been vegan
seitan.
for 15 years. I
You
rarely
must know,
eat
yeah.
tofu. I rarely
Yeah.
eat tofu. And it's so funny when everybody's like, but I hate tofu. And I'm like, I'm not really fond of it that much either. I mean, I'm not really good at cooking it myself. I'll eat
Yeah.
it. Sometimes it's good if somebody else cooks it, but it's not something I eat a lot. As it's not, it's not mandatory to eat tofu as a
Yeah.
vegan. I
Yeah.
mean, beans, lentils, nuts, seeds have tons of protein.
Yeah,
Every
even broccoli.
every plant food
Yeah,
has protein
yeah,
in it.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah,
It's I mean and that was a big thing, was that obviously here, there's anywhere in the world you can get canned chickpeas, lentils, beans, anything, right? So
yeah,
as long as you've got that and you've got some fresh vegetables, you can do just about anything. So
yeah,
yeah, and I love cooking, so for me it was fun to get into it. And also I mentioned that also when I became vegan, I also then went online and did this course to study vegan nutrition. So I understood a lot of the different components of what I needed and so on. So I really am very happy in a way that this is where I became vegan. I've not been able to rely on stuff like you see some of the vegans who pretty much eat predominantly these ready-made proteins, for example,
yeah,
and I've not had that. We've been just making our own
yeah,
burgers or whatever it is, or just making stews or curries with chickpeas or lentils, and it works absolutely fine. Or making my own bolognese with lentils and
yeah. And
um,
that's the thing about, see, living in the USA and doing the outreach that I do, we get so many people who say, "Well, I can't do that. I can't do that. How am I going to get this, or how am I going to get my protein? And they don't realize how extremely privileged they are, or they try to say, well, you can't be vegan in this country or that country.
yeah,
And they don't realize that people are vegan in countries that are far less privileged than they are in.
yeah,
And they're just making excuses by using somebody else.
yeah,
First of all, they're in the middle of a city and there's a Beyond Burger at the grocery store. They can easily get that. And a lot of them live off of that when
yeah,
they first go vegan in the US. And it's great that we have those alternatives, but there's tons of vegans living out there that are living on just vegetables.
yeah.
And they're perfectly happy with it because it's just an excuse, you know? It's an
Yeah.
excuse.
And some of the cheapest foods have protein. You can have brown bread, you can have oats. It's got
Yep.
protein in it as
Seitan,
well.
which
So
is wheat.
yeah, wash your. So I go and buy my 10 rupee bag of flour, and I make myself seitan, and it's amazing.
Yep.
It's yeah, it takes time, but it's not difficult to make. So
It's actually, you know
yeah,
what? It's so funny because when I first became vegan and I learned how to make seitan, my first recipe that I had, and I still have the book, you had to wash your flour. And it was like
yeah,
a 5-pound bag of flour I had to wash, and it came out like this much seitan in the end, because you wash it down until it's gluten. And I didn't even know about vital wheat gluten at the time. And then when I
yeah,
found vital wheat gluten, and you just add vital wheat gluten to flour and you mix it up, and bam, you're done. Now everybody's going back to washed
yeah,
flour. Like it's
yeah.
the new trend. I'm like, I thought it was a godsend to find vital wheat gluten. Now everybody wants to go back to the old fashioned
Yeah,
way. But you know what? It's good to know how to cook from scratch. It is. It's good to know how
absolutely.
to do it. There's no excuse. It
And
can be done.
they literally just got so that the first supplier has started importing vital wheat gluten just this week here in Seychelles.
Yeah.
And so I've now finally tried it, but it costs so much more than making my own
Yeah,
washed
than
flour
just buying
instead.
the
So
it
yeah,
takes
but
a
it was
little
so
time, and if
easy.
you got it, that's great. If you're
Yeah,
in more of a hurry, make the investment for the vital
yeah,
wheat gluten. But it can be done. I used to do it all the
yeah,
time when I lived in Chicago. I used to wash my own flour. I know it sounds
yeah.
funny, but everybody, it's the new trend now. It is. It's
It
going
is.
back to that.
Yeah.
So, you're saying it's easy to be vegan in
I
Seychelles?
I would say it's not easy. It isn't easy for someone who is not used to cooking, perhaps, and someone who doesn't maybe know nutrition. Um, but just by using Google and being creative with what's available in your supermarket, you can absolutely be vegan here. I think you might even have a healthier diet than someone who lives in Sweden, for example, because
Mhm.
here you are actually using the base product. You are using the actual source of the protein instead of something that's shop bought. And same thing with all your vitamins and minerals that you might need. You are having to be creative here and make use of what's available. I think in a way it's more difficult to be vegan here, but I also really see it as a blessing. I really do. I really, really
Well, you
do.
said it's more difficult to be vegan if you're not resourceful, or.
Yeah.
I think something you said that's very important is Google.
Yeah.
I go to a lot of these vegan groups, and it amazes me how many people, and this isn't meant as an insult, but it's true. They're lazy, and they go in. Can you tell me a recipe for this? Can you? There's a million recipes. If you Google or you go on YouTube, that's how I did it. You're
Yeah.
gonna find a million recipes for that. You don't have to come on here and have everybody like give you the link to every
Yeah.
recipe. Go on there and do it yourself. And as long as it's taking you to ask this question, you'd have 5 recipes.
Yeah.
And it's just like I don't understand. The first thing I learned when I got on the internet, and I'm still not that great at the internet, was how to Google. you
Yeah.
know,
It's the answer to anything, really. It's absolutely
you're
everything is
gonna
out there.
find a recipe. Just
And you'll find reviews of that recipe. So
Exactly, exactly. You're gonna find a video of that
yes.
recipe.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
true.
it's oh my god. But what would you say, um, your struggles are like with society there? I mean, you're saying what the struggles are like, with meal planning and stuff like that. You don't have fast foods. Um, and basically you should know how to cook. If you want to be really resourceful as a vegan there. But what are the struggles in the society as a vegan? Is it accepted there?
Yeah, I'd say it's very much accepted because there are, I would say there's already a good number of vegans here, and there is also I think, a big appreciation for plant foods. But perhaps there is also a little bit of ignorance in some places. There can be so some of the restaurants they've started and tried to have vegan options on the menu, and some of them had a few little hiccups, I think, in the beginning, and still serving dairy, thinking that was vegan, and so on. But at the same time, and also if you go out to any regular restaurant here that doesn't have a vegan menu and you ask for a vegan meal, you typically get spaghetti with tomato sauce, or I mean, my local little restaurant down the road on the beach, they have an Italian chef who works there, and bless him, he has not judged me at all for asking to have my pizza without cheese on. He's been amazing and very understanding. But yeah, I mean, a lot of places that you'll ask for having vegan food, and they'll be like, "So you can eat eggs then?" You're like, "No,
Yeah.
no, I can't."
Or I heard you can eat chicken, right?
Yeah,
That's an animal.
yeah. It's so funny, my
Yeah.
sister and I, we always joke about when she used to come visit me in Barcelona, and this is going back 15 years or so, and she would want to, you want to order a vegetarian sandwich, and back then in Spain, a vegetarian sandwich is a tuna sandwich because it comes in a tin. So I suppose they didn't realize that actually comes from a fish.
That's an animal. Have you ever seen a tuna? And how freaking huge they are?
Yeah.
I hate to say this, before I was vegan, I went on a deep sea fishing trip. We caught a tuna. They're massive. They're huge. And then I realized, like, how much money they make off of one fish, because they're giving you like this much for like $2. And
yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm more sad for the fish now than I am for my wallet, but
yeah.
But how do people view animal rights where you live?
So again, I would say it's probably, two ends of the spectrum. I think there are a lot of people here who really do care about animals, and there's organizations here specifically working with, for example, the rescuing of dogs, or the looking after homeless dogs. There's a lot of people who will go and because generally here it's a beautiful environment and temperature is the same all year round. So some of the homeless dogs, they can actually live outside and it's fine, it's okay conditions. But there are
You're
people who
close to the equator.
yeah. So it's not like they will freeze or be too hot at any point of the year. But there are a lot of people who will have sort of a pack of street dogs, and they always go and feed those dogs, which is part of that caring nature of people here. But of course,
do you have shelters there?
There is there's at least 2 shelters, possibly more, but there's at least 2 shelters who take in dogs, and obviously focus, I think, on things like puppies or injured dogs, and also vet care here is so cheap, so it's easy to support these organizations as well.
That's good.
But then also, of course, like anywhere in the world, there's still people who do not perhaps recognize animals as sentient beings, and don't perhaps reflect on the fact that that there's this one big major chicken producer here on the island. No one ever questions why.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Like, do they have any large farms, or is it all just backyard? Or do they have big slaughterhouses, or is it just people in their homes doing it?
Well, so I mean, the chicken farm, it's I would say it's big in the sense that, of course, it's got a lot of chickens in there, but you don't see any of that because it's all inside one tiny building. So, so that's people don't really question that, I suppose. So there is some animal farming here, but if you look around you, you see there's not much land that is purpose. It's not fit for the purpose of rearing a lot of livestock. So I don't really see how do you raise cows or chickens here in either way. Animal farming is not good, but I do think that you still, I mean, I've come across a lot of people who do care a lot about animal rights. They do what they can to, especially this whole culture around rehoming dogs and so on. That there is a lot of that happening here.
Now, do you get any
Seafood.
like animal rights groups, like saving the oceans, trying to raise awareness about
Yeah,
animal rights, or are they just doing it through the environmental issues?
no, from what I've seen, it's more the environmental side of things here. So you do have, I mentioned there's the Ocean Project. There's also been some activities here with Parley, the international organization as well. So it's more about the oceans, obviously, because that's the key thing that most people focus on here, being in the middle of it. But I haven't seen any animal rights organizations with a presence here.
Do
I
you
may be
guys have
wrong,
any
but
zoos or aquariums? Like anything
no,
like that as entertainment? That
no,
sometimes that has an impact
yeah,
on if you have animal rights, because I guess they don't feel like they have like huge issues there as far as
yeah,
establishments
it's
like that. I
yeah. I
don't know.
mean, so for example, the fishing industry. So if you there is a huge fishing industry here, and
Sure.
it's tuna, for example.
Yeah.
But if you speak to local people here and they say, oh, but I only eat the local fish that's caught, that I buy it down the road or whatever, and it's like, okay, fine, but you mentioned that tuna is a big fish, but you see here tunas that they're much smaller. They're not really meant to be picked out of the ocean anyway. They're not big enough. And you see some fishermen, they come back from the fishing trips and you can see they've got a baby shark in their nets and so on. So there is, I don't think there's anyone standing up for the rights of fish and seafood. I call them seafood. They're not food.
I know. Sea
Um,
life, sea life.
Sea life. There, because I suppose there's such a big part of the economy here and people's livelihoods, so no one really wants to touch on that.
Well, it tends to
Um,
happen on the islands, so
yeah.
yeah.
But no, there's no aquariums. There's pens for tortoises, quite a lot of tortoises.
But you
But
have sanctuaries for tortoises there, or
I'm not sure
preserves.
there are. Yeah, in some of the islands, I know that there are more sort of sanctuaries, but all the major five-star hotels, for example, and any sort of touristic site will usually have a tortoise pen.
Oh,
I mean, most of them that I've seen, they're absolutely fine, and tortoises are generally very well taken care of here. But but yeah, no, there's no sort of zoo of any kind. There's no little
good.
animal petting farm or anything like that, really.
Well, sometimes when you go to the tourists, do you get a lot of tourists there?
A lot, yes. It's
Yeah.
one of the
So
main sources of income here.
yeah, sometimes when you get tourist areas, they tend to use animals as an attraction. So that's why I was
Yeah.
asking about that. But that's good that they don't have, at least they don't have that. Um, so let me ask you, what would you say your favorite form of activism is?
So as I mentioned, what's I suppose very close to my heart is animal rescue. So especially adopt, don't shop is big for me. I know it's very different in different countries. So when I lived in Dubai, it is so important because partly the conditions are awful for any dog that lives in the street. But also that culture around sort of disposing of animals because it was an unwanted gift and so on. It's very sad. But then at
Well,
the same time,
unfortunately, that's Dubai isn't the only place that has that
no, I
problem.
know, I know it happens in a lot of places.
Yeah.
But I suppose there's some countries. I know. I think was it California who introduced a while back that there's no more pet shops.
Yeah,
Um,
I think so, and I wish that were everywhere. I happen to live in a
yeah,
state where we have lots of puppy mills, and
yeah. And people are
we're
perhaps not
working
so
against
aware
that.
of, yeah, and people are not aware of, especially when they import from a reputable European breeder. They don't realize, okay, unless you actually went to visit this place, you don't know what it looks like. You don't know that that picture of the happy mummy dog is perhaps not the
Yeah.
reality, and people are not too aware of that. And people have very poor excuses about why not to adopt. They say that, oh, but I don't know where this dog came from. Maybe
Yeah,
it's
I
got
don't
a
know their
trauma and so
temperament.
on.
There's no
Yeah,
guarantee just because you forcibly bred an animal. There's no
yeah,
guarantee of that. As a matter, the best dogs I've ever known are shelter dogs.
yeah, absolutely. My
You
dogs
know,
are, I mean, I have a favorite dog. My best dog. He was over a year old when we adopted him. We've got no idea where he came from. He is the
yeah.
sweetest, kindest dog. He's the one I'm the least worried about nipping at my children if they poke him in the eye. He is such a great dog. So there's a lot
Shelter
of poor
dogs are not
excuses.
broken. Not always broken dogs. It's the people they
No,
came from that are broken. You
exactly,
know,
exactly.
my boy was 2 years old when I adopted him. He
Yeah.
passed last October.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Um, but he was with me until his 15th birthday, and he was absolutely the best dog. And it's not just because I'm biased. He's the best dog ever. I mean, I didn't
Yeah.
need to put him on a leash. I hardly needed to train him. We bonded from the beginning. It was love at first sight, and I miss him so much.
Oh,
He truly was the best boy ever. And
yeah.
I don't know what his background was. I just know that he was awesome, and
Yeah.
there'll never be another boy like him. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, just these dogs aren't broken. It's the people that are broken.
Yeah.
You know, I've known dogs that um, and I've been working with dogs for 15 years, so I've seen a lot of different things. But for example, there was a dog at a place at a boarding facility I worked at that was an older German Shepherd, very very large dog, and he was older, and he had belonged to an older couple. That older couple happened to pass away,
Yeah.
and he was suddenly stuck without a home. There was nothing wrong with this dog, but nobody wants to get a huge German Shepherd that's older, because if he was put in a shelter, they're going to think there's something wrong with. There's nothing wrong with him. His
Mhm.
his caretakers died. And that's what happens to some of these animals, or somebody was unscrupulous, and they bred their animals. It had nothing to. It wasn't their fault.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's horrible. And I know
Yeah.
that I did visit Jordan, and I happened to find out while I was there that in that culture they don't, or at least back then, that was like 2002, but they didn't they didn't believe in having dogs in their house. So
So that's a misconception that some people have made about the Quran, because in the UAE as well, there would be people would say, oh, but Muslims, they don't believe in having dogs inside, and so on. And yes, that's
well,
true for
that's what
some
I
of
was
them.
told by the person I was
Yeah,
there with, who's
but
from there.
apparently this is a misinterpretation of the Quran, because in the Quran it talks a lot about
Okay.
dogs being companions of mankind, and essentially being mankind's best friend. And there's, like with all holy books, there will always be misinterpretations of text that is ancient, and people
Imagine
will
that. I mean, how could you do that when it was written by men? I mean,
yeah, 2000 years ago.
yeah,
So it's because that's very interesting. That was something that was raised in a lot of the dog rescue groups while I was in Dubai, and you would have Muslim people speak up and say, listen, this is actually incorrect, because if you read the Quran, this is what it says. But yes, some people have misinterpreted that, and think that you shouldn't let dogs in your house, or that dogs are filthy. But in actual fact, you'll see a lot of Muslims in the UAE who absolutely love dogs as well, and who are very engaged in animal rescue as well.
that's great.
Um, so again, two sides of the coin. There'll always be people at
I
one end
have
of the
actually,
spectrum and people at the
yeah,
other end.
I have actually, especially since doing this series, have run into many people who are Muslim in different countries that do rescue animals.
Yeah,
So rescue cats and dogs and stuff like that. So yeah, there's a lot of misinterpretation when it comes to when it comes to holy scriptures. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. So let me ask you, if a vegan visits where you live, where do you think they should go? And this doesn't have to be a restaurant or anything like that. But
Yeah.
do you happen to have any vegan restaurants at all?
So there are no vegan restaurants, but there is a vegetarian restaurant. Unfortunately, it's located in an industrial area, so you might be a little bit sort of put off when you first arrive there. That it's perhaps not the best setting, and also bear in mind that the restaurant industry is not anywhere near what you might be used to. However, it is a restaurant that is run by Indian people, so it's Indian food, and they have some amazing vegan dishes, and they have very clearly put a separate vegan menu that's quite extensive as well. They cater to a variety of different diets within their menu as well, so they'll also have sort of the gluten-free options and so on. And so that's one place that I suppose has the biggest variety. But I know that there's also a few other restaurants that sort of caught on to that.
Well, that was kind of a side question, because you had mentioned about restaurants earlier. But really, when I asked that question, where should they go? It doesn't have to be a restaurant. Where do you think people should
Yeah.
go?
I mean, one of the beautiful things to do here is take a boat trip, go out in the ocean and snorkel with some of the beautiful fish here. We've had some amazing experiences where sort of near some of the national marine parks, where you go in and there's these massive fish, and you know, that they'll come up and they're really curious to see what you're doing, and it's absolutely beautiful. And you can get lucky and you can see a sea turtle or like a reef shark as well, of course. But one thing to be conscious of, which I think this is all over the world, of course, a lot of the reef is unfortunately quite damaged,
Yeah.
bleached. But they have done some attempts to artificially rebuild the reef here. I don't know all the details, but it's great to know that they are working in that direction.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, going here as well, island hopping is great. It can be a little bit expensive, so
Well,
look into the different
115 of them,
options.
so I guess it could.
Yeah. But yeah, also the one thing we love to do is just get your hiking shoes on and go for one of the big long hikes. They might not be super, uh, you know, they're not like a European hiking trail with all the signage and so on, but there are some very clear places where you can start your hikes. And it's a great way to see and hear a lot of the wildlife, you know, whether it's, you know, the bats, the massive bats we've got here, or
Ooh, I love bats. That's
yeah, or
awesome.
like
You
tiny
just sold me by
frogs.
telling me that.
Yeah, they're amazing. Massive fruit bats, absolutely gorgeous. We also
Oh,
have really big
oh,
spiders here as well, massive
that
spiders. And
no, that I can do without.
but the great thing about Seychelles, there's actually not a single animal on land here that is poisonous. So you feel
Well,
very
okay,
safe
that's a
when you
little
go hiking.
reassuring then.
Yeah, there's nothing that can like bite you and make you sick or anything.
They'll just creep
So
me out a little
pretty
bit,
safe.
but
Yeah, yeah.
you know what? I actually like spiders. I don't mind spiders. I just don't want them in my space.
Yeah,
But I'm not a spider hater.
yeah,
I just don't know if I'd be too fond of them being big.
yeah.
But
They're
I
pretty
am
big.
yeah, but I am a huge bat fan. So
Yeah. Oh, you
I
love
would
it. You
love
love
that.
it.
Do you have
Yeah.
caves there? Do you have any caves for them, or do they
They
live in the
don't really.
trees?
Yeah, they live in the trees. They don't really live in
Okay.
caves here.
Okay.
It's a
I'm
different kind
sure
of
that I
bat.
never looked that up, but I'm sure that's different
Yeah.
dwellings for
No, I
different
mean we've got
species.
like literally outside of here. We've got so they love mangoes, for example. We've got a few mango trees dotted about ours and the
And
neighbor's
they're just hanging
garden. So
there, just eating their
yeah,
mangoes. Oh,
yeah.
I'm so jealous.
And they just sort of fly around at like in the late afternoon. You just see them flying like back and forth outside, and they're absolutely beautiful.
They're massive, aren't they? I
They're
mean, is it
they're
like
so big.
pterodactyls flying around?
Probably. Yeah, it's like a, you know, like a cat with wings or something. They're
Yeah.
huge. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it, man. All right, I definitely want to come and visit now. So, tell us, what is your favorite vegan dish that people should try if they come to visit? What is your favorite vegan dish they should try?
Oh, I mean, I would if you're coming here, you should obviously try something that's quite local. And I love the flavors of that very traditional Creole curry, and you can use the local vegetables to really make it vegan. So whether that's using breadfruit, or I love the pumpkin here, the local pumpkin, and the local aubergine is amazing.
Wow.
And what you can do, so if you come here and, you know, you might stay in one of the hotels, which obviously everything's catered, but a lot of people come here and stay in Airbnbs, which is also how you best support the local tourism economy. You support
Okay.
actual locals who are owning these places. So if you're
I
staying in an,
personally like to do that myself. I like to be in
yeah,
a home. So,
yeah, it's so much nicer. And there's beautiful places here and really unique
and you can cook,
locations.
which is cheaper when you're
Yeah.
traveling. So,
So you could either cook, and if you go to whether it's your local supermarket or like the little corner shop, or even at some of the fruit and vegetable stands, they will have the ready mix of the Creole curry spices. So all you need
oh,
is that, and you need your can of coconut milk, or you can even just you can buy like the local coconut milk that it comes in a frozen pack as well.
okay.
Um, or equally, there's some of these places where you can, if you go onto TripAdvisor, you'll find these where there'll be like a local who comes to your house to cook a classic Creole curry for you, and you just have to tell them that I'm vegan, so please only use vegetables, and they'll make that satine that I mentioned as well, which is that green papaya chutney. So I think that would be like the typical local meal that you have to try. Those spices are just incredible.
That sounds really good.
Yeah.
I love curries. So
Yeah.
I never thought about Creole and curry. I guess curry is just a word for, a mix, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
I think here in the States, when we hear curry, we think of Indian food, but a curry is
Yeah.
just really a sauce.
Yeah, it's
So,
it's anything where you cook down spices,
yeah.
and usually with onion and garlic, and you can add ginger and stuff, and any kind of
Oh,
vegetables. And sorry, the other
sounds so
thing I
good.
should mention that I discovered here, because I kept reading all these recipes that were using jackfruit, but it's like tinned young jackfruit, and I was like, what? Because I got the Bosch cooking book, and
Yeah.
I kept like, oh, where do I can't find this anywhere. And then I'm just driving down because I'd Googled and to see what does it look like. I'm like, oh, that doesn't look like something that goes in a can. That's pretty big.
Awesome.
So I was driving down past one of the vegetable, because all the fruit and vegetable stands along the road here. It's amazing. And I saw this massive big fruit, and I was like, oh my god, I have to have it. So I bought this huge big jackfruit, and I came home and I was like, right, now what? And I asked, we have a Filipina nanny, and I asked her, I said, Melody, like, what do I do with this? Because she's used to this kind of fruit. It's native to where she's from. And she was like, okay, first of all, put oil on your knife. Put oil on your knife because it's going to get messy. And then she showed me what to do with it. And I made the most incredible, like literally just cooked it down with like some onions and chili and soy sauce and things, and made it into like a really cool barbecue sandwich. And so yeah, the local jackfruit is just absolutely incredible. It's so good. And if
I
you come
have
during,
tried it fresh before. I did get
yeah,
it from an Asian store when I lived in Atlanta, Georgia. I I had I tried to do it on my own. It's
yeah,
such a pain. I
it's
personally
work.
I personally would rather get it in the can in the brine. It's a lot easier, but
Yeah.
more power to you if that's what you've got fresh. More power to you. It's just a lot of work. Uh,
Yeah, it is. It is. You have to set aside a Saturday afternoon for it.
yeah, definitely, definitely. You are tackling it. If
Yeah.
it's a big fruit. It's a lot of work. But no, that's
Yeah.
great. I did. I tried it, and I don't know. Maybe I wasn't cooking it right. I don't know. I got better results with the can. It was just so much easier. But
Yeah.
I'm
It's
pleased.
so much easier.
Thank goodness for the canned. Thank goodness for
Yeah.
Asian stores. Oh my goodness. So if a vegan comes to visit you, how can they get involved with the local vegan community there?
So there is a Facebook group, Island Vegans Seychelles, which is great because you can connect with a lot of like-minded people and ask some questions as well about where to find certain things, because it is very, just because a shop had something last week does not mean they have it this week, and they might not have it for another 6 months. So through this group, you can kind of ask, okay, has anyone seen tofu, for example? If you're looking for tofu or you're looking for almond milk, you can put the questions out there, and people are very helpful. And besides that, I mean, there's, as I mentioned, if you want to get involved in something that is, I suppose, better for the just for the environment in general, always just bring a spare bag and pick up some trash if you're on the beach, or if you're out hiking. It makes a huge difference. And yeah, bring a meal to a dog on the beach as well if you see one.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. So, finally, I want to ask you, where would you like to visit one day? And this is a hard question for me to ask you because you've traveled so much, but maybe there's
Yeah.
some place you have not been. So, where
Yeah.
would you like to visit one day and learn about veganism there?
So I definitely think there's a lot of places I've not been to in the world, but especially where I would love to go now is I'd love to go to Israel because I've heard amazing things about, especially in Tel Aviv, the vegan food there. There was an Israeli couple who reached out almost a year ago now, that they were traveling here, and they reached out on the vegan Seychelles Facebook group, and I said, hey, come to my house, I'll cook you some food, and it was lovely, and they told me all about the amazing vegan restaurants in Tel Aviv. So I would love to go there. Also, I traveled to Australia many years ago now for my honeymoon. We were there for a month, and I'd love to go back there as a vegan because I know that they have such amazing ingredients to start
Yeah.
with, and I know that there's a big vegan restaurant culture. And then this summer, I'm going finally after I think it's been almost 4 years since I was in Sweden in the summer. I'm going to Sweden with my kids to visit my family. I'm super excited. And I went on to, because we were renting a little cabin out in the countryside. So I went onto the supermarket website so that I can plan the trip and pre-order some food to the house. And I was blown away by all these vegan options. I'm so excited. I cannot wait to go and have all this incredible vegan food, like even a vegan Magnum ice cream. And, there's certain things that are just such a luxury that
Yeah.
I've just not had for a while. So yeah, so Sweden, Australia, and Israel.
Awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if you had a chance to see that I recently did an interview two vegans from Sweden.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I saw
yeah,
that. Yeah.
I guess there's a lot of there. Well, there's a vegan. There's they have their groups too. So yeah, they were saying that it's quite accessible now. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah, and
think
they
it's
even have
going that way.
there's vegan magazine, and that it's, I think, even though when my sister first became vegan, there wasn't that much of the ready stuff available, but
Hmm.
now she said it's just everything. Like it's so easy to be vegan in Sweden. And most of her friends are vegan. It's so easy, so
Well,
easy.
I'm glad I interviewed them first because you would have just spoiled it for me. No.
Yeah.
Well, you know what, Karen? Thank you so much. I know it's early in the morning for you, and it's getting about 2 a.m. for me. So,
Oh yeah.
um,
Thank you for being so flexible and being up so late.
no, it's fine. I've got a bunch of boarding dogs, so it's the
Yeah.
only time I do stay up late is on the weekends. But I know I really appreciate your time.
It's been
I've
such a
had
pleasure.
It has been a pleasure for me as well, and I thank you so much. It was wonderful meeting you, and I so want to come to Seychelles.
You really should.
It's it's so far away. I'm gonna have to find a way, but it seems like the other side of the world. But someday I'm gonna make
Yeah.
it over there. So
Yeah.
maybe I'll come over there and start your first vegan restaurant. How's that?
Yes, yes, please. It would be a huge success.
All right. Well, I'm gonna let you go, and thank you so much. I want you to have a wonderful day, and I
Thank
hope that
you.
we talk soon. Okay.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much. It's been so much fun.
All right. You have a great day.
You too.
All right.
Bye.
Bye bye. All right. Well, thank you so much. Um, that was a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed meeting her. And I hope everybody else enjoyed it as much as I did. Seychelles sounds like a paradise. I mean, come on. Out in the middle of nowhere in the Indian Ocean, basically. So far from everywhere. I don't know if that's your idea of paradise, but it's mine. And Yeah, hopefully one day. One day. So, guys, if you enjoyed this, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. I don't care. Just please react. Please like, dislike, share. Um, let me know how you feel in the comments. Definitely comment down below. All information about her and things that we've talked about will be below. If you want to know who I'm talking to next, you're just going to have to show up next week. Have a great night. Bye.